Welcome to this technical exchange. My name is Paul Brett and the subject of this video is using IBM Transformation Extender with Java Messaging System. In this video of the series I'm using Apache ActiveMQ. Other entries in this series will highlight JMS implementations from other vendors. In this video I'm going to walk through the steps to get an ITX installation to interact with a JMS implementation. More specifically, get and put messages onto JMS queues. As already mentioned, this episode in the series I will be using Apache ActiveMQ. So, I will install ITX, then Apache ActiveMQ. I will then do the absolute minimum configuration on both products for queue interaction. Lastly, I will use ITX to both put and get a message. Then I will configure and run the launcher to trigger a map on the arrival of a message on the designated watch queue. The installation files for ITX 9 with FixPack 2 can be found in Fix Central. Links are provided in the video description section. I'm going to grab Design Studio and Launcher, both 64-bit software, and place them on the desktop of a pre-prepared Windows 7 virtual machine. So here we have our Windows 7 virtual machine. As you can see on the desktop I have the installation files for Design Studio and Launcher. I'm going to go ahead and fire up the Design Studio installation now. I'm going to whip through the options, choosing the defaults for most sections. I'll change the username and company name to reflect me. I'll use the standard installation directory, standard startup. I'll do a custom installation and leave everything ticked to get everything installed. And away we go. We'll speed up time a little bit there because Design Studio takes quite a while to install. Okay, a couple of little prompts here. Yes, we want it to be the default. Some kind of warning message there, installation warning. I'm going to ignore it. Okay, so moving on to the ITX launcher. Again, I'm just going to execute the installation file. Whip through all the defaults. There'll be less questions this time because it will install in the same directory as the Design Studio. Again, I'm going to do a custom installation, leave everything ticked, and speed up time a little bit there, make that green bar go across the screen just a little quicker. Okay, that's the launcher installed. And that's it. I'm going to do the minimum configuration for now on the DTX.ini file to give me launcher startup logs. I'm also going to fire up the launcher administrator to create the initial launcheradmin.bin file so that the launcher will start when we're ready for it. Just going to add in a simple user here so that we can connect with the management console later. I'm showing my age now using the name Mercator, but there we go. Grant the user Mercator everything permissions, check the deployment directory is correct, and we're done. Let's fire up the Design Studio, make sure it runs. I think we need to advance time a little bit here. Design Studio does take a while. Okay, default workspace, yep, we're good with that. And there's the Design Studio up and running. Oh, get rid of the Windows firewall. We're happy for Design Studio to access the outside world. Close the welcome message. fill the screen, and there we go, Design Studio is ready to run for later. We're not going to need those installation files anymore, so I'm just going to delete them. Okay, so that's ITX installed. On to the next step. The installation files for Apache ActiveMQ can be found on their website. Links are provided in the video description section. I'm going to grab the latest Windows installer zip file and extract that onto the desktop of my Windows 7 virtual machine. Here we are at the Windows 7 virtual machine, and as you can see I have two Explorer windows. The first one has the zip file in it, and I am extracting the zip file to the desktop of my virtual machine. I have to speed up time a little bit here again because it takes a while. Okay, so we have the Apache MQ folder on the local hard drive. I'll just drag that window over there for a moment. I'm now actually going to just move that folder over to the Program Files subdirectory because it seems like a good place to keep that particular product. Administrator permissions required. Done. Okay, so we are finished with that window. That's Apache ActiveMQ in the correct place. Before it will run, I need to set the Java Home environment variable. The startup batch files assume that you have this variable set, so I will just quickly set that now. I'll put it in as a user variable, so that's new Java _home, and for the location I'll use the Java installation that comes with ITX. Okay, so that's the variable set. We're finished with that, and that ActiveMQ should be all ready to go. In the bin subdirectory you'll see the activemq.bat file which we need to execute, but we need to add on some parameters, so I'm going to fire up a command prompt as administrator. Let's drag that down. Okay, change to the directory where ActiveMQ is installed, bin subdirectory, and then we're going to fire up that batch file with the parameter start. ActiveMQ takes a little while to start on this machine, so I'm going to speed up time a little bit there again. You get a lot of stuff printed on the screen, but eventually it does say something like Apache ActiveMQ started. There it is, it's in the middle of the screen just there. And that's ActiveMQ pretty much ready to go. Okay, so we'll minimize that window. We're finished with that one for now. We'll just minimize that. This is empty, so we can close that. That's the zip file, we can close that. Actually that folder we're finished with, it can go in the bin. And that's ActiveMQ installed and ready to rumble. The external jar files section of the dtx.ini file must contain these two jar files, referenced as jar1 and jar2. Here we are back in our Windows 7 virtual machine, and before I edit the dtx.ini file I'm just going to show you those two jar files in the Windows Explorer. In the root product installation directory you'll find the ActiveMQ all, and then in the lib optional subdirectories you'll find the log4j. Okay, now time to actually edit the dtx.ini file, which I shall open up in Notepad. Find the external jar files section. There it is. Open up a little bit of space there and paste in the pre-prepared strings for jar1 and jar2. Okay, save that file and close it. And we can close this window as well. And that's ITX correctly referencing ActiveMQ. ActiveMQ is running, and now we just need to do some configuration items. So first we'll fire up the administrative console, which is brought up in a web browser. In my case, I've got the address localhost on port 8161. I'm going to click on the Manage ActiveMQ broker link, and it'll ask me to log in. The default username and password is admin. Okay, so if I click on the queues link here, you'll see that I don't actually have any queues defined. Now ActiveMQ will create queues on the fly as they're used, so I'm not going to do any further configuration in this screen, and in fact just rely on TX to create the queues as and when they're required. So we'll just minimize that for the moment. What I'm going to do though is create a jndi.properties file, which will define queues physical to actual. This all makes sense hopefully a bit later on. I'm going to edit that file, and I'm going to pre-populate it with a series of known working values. So in there I've defined a couple of queues, QA and QB. You'll see I've got some connection factory names defined as well. I have a queue connection factory, a vanilla connection factory, and also a topic connection factory. Okay, so let's save this file and close it. And that's all of the configuration we're going to do for now on that. So now it's time to actually get and put messages from ActiveMQ using TX. So I'm going to fire up the Design Studio here. And first thing I'm going to do is create a new extender project. I'm going to call that project Test JMS. I'm going to minimize the Design Studio, and then I'm going to bring that project up in the Explorer window to drag the jndi.properties file into it. This will be required later when I execute the maps. Okay, let's create some TX objects, starting with a type tree. I shall call my type tree generic. I shall insert one item called text item, and that's just a generic text blob of 0 to infinite size. Let's analyze that type tree. That's fine, and save it. One type tree created. Next up, we need a map source file. I'm going to call my map source file test JMS, the same as the project. And within that map source file, I'm going to create a new map. I'm going to call it JMS put. Okay, this map needs an output card. I shall call this output card out1. I shall utilize the type tree I created earlier, specifying the infinite size text blob. I shall change the adapter from file to JMS, and then I shall paste in a known working ActiveMQ JMS connection string. You'll see there I've got a connection factory URL, an initial context factory, a connection factory name of Q connection factory, a queue name of QA. The -TT forces the message to be a text type, and finally -T on the end there forces the trace to be created. Going to put in a fixed text blob to send to the queue, the obligatory hello world. And I'm also going to change the map audit so that gets created in case we have any problems. There we go. I'm going to save and build this map. Now I'm not going to run it in the Design Studio because the Eclipse Map Designer has difficulties loading in jar files correctly. So I'm going to head on over to the Explorer window and execute the map using the command server. Map executed and it completed successfully. I'll just open the log there and show you. adapter success, adapter was JMS, bytes were 12. Let's go over to the queue list. You'll see that it's not changed, but we need to hit the refresh key. And now that I've refreshed, you'll see that an example.a queue was created, and there is one message in the queue. If I browse the queue, there's one message ID which I can click on, and in that message ID you can see the hello world that I placed into the queue. Okay, let's try a get example. So we'll just minimize that for the moment. Back to the Design Studio. I'm going to copy my card because it has pretty much the correct output string, the correct adapter string that I need. I'm going to copy it to a map called JMS get, which will be automatically created. I'm going to copy it as an input card called in1. Just double check all the details there. Let's make that window a bit bigger. And the only thing I need to change on the adapter connection string is I need to take the -tt off because it's not required as a get. Okay, so we can create an output card now. I'm going to call it out1. Going to use exactly the same text blob type tree object. And I'm going to leave the adapter as file and get it to create a file called output.txt. I'm going to map input to output, no funny mapping weirdness, just input to output. And then I'm going to execute that map. Oh, the map is missing. Back to the Design Studio. Let's try that again. Build, and there it is. Okay, I'm going to execute that in the command server. You'll notice that there's no output.txt file there at the moment, and after the map has run, output.txt appears, and if I open it, you will see the hello world string. If I go back to my queue list, you will note that if I press refresh, the number of messages remains at 1, because what I forgot to do on the input card was change the onSuccess value from keep to delete. I want the message to be dequeued and deleted. So if I save, build and run that map again, and refresh the queue list, you will see now that the number of pending messages has dropped down to 0. And that's basically get and put a message using TX with ActiveMQ JMS. So now we come to the section where I demonstrate the launcher being used to trigger from a message arriving from a queue. I renamed the JMS get map to JMS listen. It's got the same input card, it reads a message from QA. The other change I had to make was copy the jndi.properties file into the transformation extender root directory. I created a system, one input card, one output card. It's the JMS listen map. The input card is reading from QA. I changed the output card to put the message to QB, and the type tree on input actually extracts just the text message part of the message, removing the beginning and the end. So in our target queue, QB, we should see hello world appear eventually. As you can see there on QA, there are no messages at the moment. This system has been deployed to the ITX deployment directory. I've set up the launcher monitor to show us when maps run, so all that's left to do now is to start the service. Okay, so the service is running, the launcher monitor has connected, and it's showing us that there are no maps running currently. So we need to put a message onto QA, and we'll do that with the JMS put map. We'll run that with the command server. The map completed successfully, and in the launcher monitor you can see that a map has triggered. So this would be the JMS listen map, and if you look at the refreshed queue, you will see that example A has no messages, but example B has been created and it has one message on it. So we can be sure this map has triggered correctly. Let's browse the messages. bring up the message ID, and as I said, the hello world has come through intact without any garbage at the beginning and at the end. So we can execute JMS put a few more times, and every time you execute it you should see that the launcher monitor is showing that a map is being executed. There we go, three little green lines. If we pause the service, the JMS listener is paused. Messages are noted being arriving at the queue, but the maps are not triggered immediately. So if we run our put map 3 more times, there will be 3 messages in the queue. As you notice, nothing was triggered on the map. There we go, we have 3 in A and 4 in B currently. And if we go and restart the service, well, I meant to resume rather than restart, but doesn't matter. The service restarted, and if you have a look in the background, the launcher monitor will refresh and those 3 maps will kick off immediately, and there you go, almost in parallel there, have retrieved those 3 messages. Example A should show 0, example B should show 7, and after refresh you can see that that is the case. So that basically is ITX launcher acting as a listener and executing a transformation map on any message being enqueued, and this particular map also enqueues a message back to another queue. In summary then, ensure that the correct jar files are being referenced. It's a different set for each JMS implementation. Contact your JMS vendor for further details. Check your adapter connection command matches the created connection objects. Sometimes these can be case sensitive. Enable the JNI layer trace in the dtx.ini file. Use the command server or Design Studio to execute simple maps and view the traces after each run. Enable the JMS adapter trace on the adapter command line with the verbose option if appropriate. Check queue names. Again, I stress that these can be case sensitive. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch and listen to my presentation. It is my hope that you found this session both interesting and informative. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Further videos in this series will demonstrate JMS implementations from other vendors such as JBoss, OpenMQ, SonicMQ, and of course WebSphere-MQ JMS. Please follow me on Twitter for relevant tweets regarding product functionality, defect reports, and upcoming knowledge events.